Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this live session with us at Rare India. Today is World Heritage Day, and one of the tenets at Rare has been to promote the tangible and the intangible stories of India. With this thought, I'd like to introduce Ramakant Kar from Shreyas Yoga Retreat. Shreyas is a retreat that is located outside of Bangalore, and where yoga is the principal medium through which the medium or message of living life completely is communicated. Ramakant is a certified Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga teacher from the Mandala Ashtanga Yoga Shala in Mysore and has studied history from the Utkal University. A practitioner of yoga from childhood, he's been part of the Shreyas team since 2004 and will be conducting a pranayam session for us this morning. So over to you, Ramakant. I think, Ramakant he's having a slight internet issue. Oh, I will have to get him back in. Just a moment. As I mentioned, he's going to be conducting a pranayam session for us this morning. Just a moment. He's having issues disconnecting. In a moment. But meanwhile, I can probably just talk a little about Shreyas. Shreyas Yoga Retreat is it's a retreat dedicated to wellness and yoga, and typically it's located outside Bangalore, and it's a wonderful place, for not it. It's not just about yoga, but it's the wellness, typically a program can last there from a week to a month. It's ideal. It's located in a beautiful part outside the city of Bangalore, and I think the only way is just go there. Let me try connecting Shreya Ramakant once more. We seem to have lost his connection completely. Just a moment, please. Okay. Here we have Rucha. All right. Rucha has joined us from Shreyas. Rucha, we can't see you.
Yeah.
Hi, Rucha.
Hi.
We seem to have lost Ramakant. I don't know what happened. So maybe you could take us to the pranayam session.
Give us a minute. Give me a minute.
Yeah, sure. As we all know, yoga is such a integral part of India, and there has been such a huge resurgence in its practice over the last many years. And Shreyas Yoga Retreat really has been something to, they've really encapsulated it very well to preserve the heritage and continue promoting yoga in its holistic manner. I think, just a minute, I think, yes, I think we're getting Ramakant back in now. Sorry for this, everyone. I think there seem to be some major issues. We should be connecting with him in a bit. One of the tenets of pranayam, the benefits of pranayam is its daily practice. It really helps our blood circulation. It's it centers us. It helps in mind focus, discipline, creating balance of the mind, and it improves your overall uh, focus, energy. Gives you enough energy for the rest of the day. Uh, it's a major stress and reliever, benefits for those who may be suffering from depression. And especially in these times today, it's a wonderful thing to be practicing with the with the COVID situation. It'll help build our immunity as well. So there we have Ramakant. Welcome back, Ramakant.
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
Sorry, I think net is getting disturbances.
No problem. So if you could begin, Ramakant, if you could position the phone a little better.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. So over to you, Ramakant, for the pranayam session.
Yeah. So, namaste to everyone, those who have joined with us. This is Ramakant from Shreyas Retreat, Bangalore. So, today we'll go for a short type of pranayama practice. Pranayama means it is a breathing practice. It is not exercise. So, which we practice through the breath expansion, and which is you breathe through the nose in and out. Is the left and the right nostril of practice. So the pranayama is control of our prana, which is known as a energy, and the energy which is having responsibility throughout our body, whatever things is happening, even surrounding to us. So through the breath, which we can control the prana through the body, and you get energy, good energy to the physically and the mentally, which brings calm to the mind, and you get control over the body and the mind there. So before practicing the pranayama, the most important thing is we need to take a comfortable position. Even you can sit on the floor if you are comfortable, or if you are not comfortable on the floor, you are welcome to take a chair or cushion, or even you can sit on the sofa, which is comfortable. So most important, you are effortlessly, comfortably sitting and taking a position and making a posture for the pranayama practice. So let's start and take a position if you are joining for the pranayama practice now, and sit comfortably and try to keep your back straight. Observe the posture. Observe the position. And gently close the eyes. Become aware of your body from head to the toes. Especially relax your shoulders, neck, relax the face. Ensure that you are not holding, not tightening any muscles or joints in your body. Be comfortable and relax in the posture. Gradually bring awareness to your breathing and watch your natural, spontaneous breathing. So here, ensure that you are not forcing your breath. You are not making noise of your breath. Let the breathing to happen effortlessly, naturally, smoothly. And watch your each breathing in and out, experiencing it. And ask yourself, is it shallow? Is it fast? Or is it deep? slow. It happens smoothly, effortlessly. As we become aware of the breath, you will enjoy to have a deep breath, long breath. You will feel the expansion through the breath, within and out. Now slowly move the awareness to the surroundings. Being aware of the body, all the senses to the body, be aware of the surroundings around you. You can feel, smell, and listen. All the sensations are around you without interfering with them. Once again, bring awareness back to the body, to the breath. After a few blinks, slowly open the eyes. So first pranayama today we'll go for practice, which is the deep breathing. The deep breathing, which is conducted in the three sections in our body. So first focus, which is to the abdomen region, and then connect towards the chest, which is the clavicular region, upper chest. And the third place, which is the clavicular, the thoracic, and the clavicular is the collarbone. The three sections, which is you say vibhaga pranayama, abdomen, chest, and the collarbone. So one by one section we will focus here. So place the palms simply to the abdomen region. Each inhale and each exhale, observe the abdominal movement. As you inhale, it gently expands and it bulges out very slow. As you exhale, it slowly goes in, sinking more inside. As you inhale, the abdomen bulges out like a balloon, with air entering into the body. Then as you exhale, very, very slow, with the abdomen to suck in. So 3 more times, take your own pace. Only focus to the abdomen here without expanding the chest. So like you drop the air all the way to the abdomen region. And as you exhale, complete empty from the abdomen. As you inhale, abdomen come out. And as you exhale, abdomen goes in. One more last time there. As you inhale, abdomen bulges out. Feel the movement as you exhale. Very slow, smooth move to sucking. Gently drop the hands. Now feel the changes to the abdomen region now. Then shift the awareness to the chest region and place the palms to the upper chest. Feel the chest region here. Each inhalation, you expand the chest. As you exhale, contract your chest with 5 breaths, effortlessly, smoothly. Inhale, gently to expand the chest. And then as you exhale, very, very slow, gently relax your chest. Inhale to expand the chest. And exhale to contract the chest. Inhale to expand 2 more. With one pace. Inhale, let's breathe in, feel to expanding the chest. Breathing out, feel the chest is falling down, relaxing the chest. As you inhale, expand your chest. Then as you exhale, relax the chest. Now, the third section, which is to the collarbone, the top of the movement here. So place the fingertips to the collarbones. Simply you need to feel as it is. So as you inhale, slightly to lift the collarbones up. As you exhale, feel the collarbones is relaxing down. With 5 breaths here. Inhaling. As you exhaling. As you inhale. Breathe effortlessly, do not force too much. And exhale. Few more breaths here. As you finish the 5 breaths, the clavicular region, drop the both hands down. So this is, we just practice the Vibhaga Pranayama. So we'll connect with the 3 parts now, abdomen, chest and the clavicular, which is called a deep breathing. It's full yogic breathing. Because some reason, our breathing will be shallow, which will be most of time in the chest region. So ideally, the breath is supposed to from the abdomen region and relaxing from the abdomen region. So it's supposed to be like each inhalation, abdomen to come out and expanding the chest and then the clavicular to lift it up. And then each exhalation, it falls down to relaxing the shoulder region and the chest and abdomen goes in like somebody is sleeping in the deep. How the breath happen naturally. But the deep breathing, which is the natural breath, it's supposed to happen naturally and deep. If our breathing is more to the chest region, so we need to work out with the deep breathing practices. So now, so close the eyes, let your both hands are resting on the knees, let the shoulders relax here. As you inhale, feel that your air is dropping all the way to the abdomen, so abdomen bulges out. And then towards your chest, and then towards the clavicular, the shoulder blade. So lift it up light. Then as you exhale to relax the clavicular, then the chest and abdomen goes in, goes in, goes in. The same way, practice with the 5 breaths. Inhale, the abdomen bulges out. Chest expands. Then the collarbone. And then exhale to relax the clavicular. Then chest, abdomen goes in. 3 more times practice with your own pace, with awareness. Keep the mind engaged, merge with the breath. Let it flow through the body. It's flowing naturally inside. Inhale, abdomen, then to the chest, then to the shoulder blade. As you exhale, the shoulders, chest, abdomen in. So one more last time breath. Inhale. And exhale. Stop the practice now. Be in silent for a while and watch within. Notice the changes in the physical body, the mind, especially notice the changes in the breath. How do you feel? Just watch yourself, ask yourself, let the mind answer to you. Do you feel energized? Do you feel have better breathing? Do you feel the mind is calm, less thoughts, less disturbance? Okay, now after a few blinks, slowly open the eyes. So the deep breathing practice which helps to digestive system as well as raise our energy level in the physical body as well to the mind, because the mind gets disturbances whenever and whatever reason, so it affects to the breathing. So the breathing becomes shallow or fast. So whenever we keep the deep breathing practices, it balances in our mind through the nadis, which is the channels in our body, nervous system. It keep balance to the mind as well as to the physical body. So one more practice we'll go for the today. It's called Nadi Shodhana. Is alternate nostril breathing, which is practiced always before each meditation class, because this keeps more calming to the mind and also brings balance and great focus in our mind. So in this practice, so once again you can check the position. If you are not comfortable, you can change the position and make comfortable position there and keep the back straight. And simply use the right hand, index and the middle finger, which is Tarjani in Sanskrit, Tarjani and the Madhyama, index and the middle finger, and your ring finger, right hand ring finger and the thumb, bring it to little close. So here you can bring it right thumb to the right nostril and the right hand ring finger which to the left nostril. So do not block the nose now here, so simply touch the nose. So right side with the right thumb and the ring finger with the left nostril. So first take a deep inhalation and exhalation through the both nostrils here. Now block the right nostril with the right thumb. Inhale deep through the left nostril. Now block the left nostril with the ring finger and exhale through the right nostril. Allow the right shoulder to relax here. Now again, inhale through the right nostril. Block the right nostril with thumb, then exhale through the left nostril. So this is the one round of practice. We will go for another 4 rounds with your own pace. So inhale through the left. Block the left. Exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Block the right. Exhale through the left. This is finish of the second round. Now going to the third round. Inhale through the left nostril. Block the left nostril. Exhale through the right nostril. Inhale the right side. Block the right side, then exhale left side. Now 4th round, inhale left side. Block the left side, exhale to the right side. Inhale right side. Block right, exhale to the left. One more down now. Inhale left. Block the left and exhale right. Inhale right. And block the right, exhale to the left. As you exhale to the left, the fifth round is finished. Now simply drop the right hand down. Keep the eyes closed. And watch yourself. Once again, observe the mind, breathing, and the body. Feel the calmness in the mind. Feel the smooth breath effortlessly through the both nostrils. And feel the relaxation in the physical body. Now rub the palms, both palms. Join the palms and make it rub. Make heat between the palms. Once you feel warm between the palms, gently palming to the eyes, then to the cheeks, ears, your back of the neck of the neck, and slowly drop the both hands down. And after a few blinks, to open the eyes. Thank you everybody for joining with us. Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Ramakant. Thank you so much, Ramakant. This was such a wonderful session.
It was a great pleasure to joining with everyone who have joined with us.
Yes, thank you so much. Once again. Yeah. Do join us for some more sessions on Instagram with Rare India today. We have at 12:30 we have a Rao Jodha Park Desert Legacy with Pradeep Kishan, and at 2:30 we have Aditya from Stoke Palace talking about the living heritage and the Stoke Palace. And at 4:30 we will be having Meenu Nageshwaran, who will be talking about health foods, heritage foods for health. And a little surprise at 6:30. So do join us all. Thank you so much. Thank you once again, Ramakant.
Thank you so much. I think I'll join with my personal ID also.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, sorry.
Hello.
Oh, sorry, slight technical glitch.
No problem. Not a problem at all.
Hello, this is Akshita and Mrinalika, the wonderful princesses of the Mayurbanj house.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining in, and thank you so much Rare and Sejal for
moderating this and hosting this. We're really excited to be part of this video. And we're gonna
I see the rain has stopped.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because there's been like there was a lightning a few seconds back with the sun setting. I'm just gonna hang it over to Mrinalika, who can sort of direct us a little bit, so you get to see our background.
Hi everyone, I'm Mrinalika. So I'm just going to be taking you all through my property, and Akshita's actually be leading that for us. So she's going to be like giving us a little bit of a tale about the property as well as a little bit behind the story behind the Belgaria Palace. So just stay tuned. If there are any technical glitches, don't be disappointed. We'll be back on. We're going to figure this out so smoothly. All right?
Yes, we can, indeed.
Just without further ado, I just wanted to introduce you to my mother. So that's Rashmi Bhanchdev, and this is
Hello.
actually the Rare team and family. So today we're just going to be taking all of you all around the Belgaria Palace. My sister's going to be leading it. My mom just wanted to peek in and say hi, so there she is.
Lovely to
All
see
right,
you.
and we're going to begin now. So let's follow my sister around.
Hi everyone. So we wanted to start off by showing you. Hi everyone. So we wanted to start off by showing you a little bit about the architecture of the property. So I think you're able to see the front facade, and I think we'll just begin by telling you a little bit about the history and the family, the Bhanja dynasty. And as and when you guys have questions or any comments or clarifications, Sejal, please feel free to chime in. Jita, you too. And anyone, if you have comments, we can address them now or a little bit in the end.
Okay.
So to begin with, this beautiful property you see behind me was built in 1804 under the instructions of Her Highness Maharani Sumitra Devi. So in 1804, they actually wanted this. They wanted this property to be a homestay, more a guest house for foreign dignitary. So the idea behind this was the Mayurbhanj Palace is about 10 minutes away, but this property was on a raised hill. So what you see behind me is actually a performance area for the Mayurbhanj Chau, which is a martial arts dance form which has been there in Orissa and in Mayurbhanj specifically for the past 100 years. And well, something really interesting about the architecture was what you see behind me is Greek and Roman. It's inspired by both. That's characterized by the columns. So what you see on the columns is Doric and Corinthian. So Doric and Corinthian is an architecture style form where if you look towards the upper edges of the column, you'll see these flower motifs and nature motifs like leaves. When you sort of go towards the edges of the house, you'll see gargoyles printed in different animal heads and faces. Popular because the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And like talking about fairy tales, Mayurbhanj has had a lot of interesting characters come stay with us. We saw yesterday a beautiful video by the Kipling property, and Mark Shand had actually visited Belgaria, something he mentions in his book, with his very famous elephant Tara. Apart from that, you also had some really interesting characters such as royal families who came to Mayurbhanj because of the nearby hunting grounds in Simlipal. Also J.N. Tata, Dr. Annie Besant, who was an Irish reformist. You had Hemendranath Majumdar, a famous artist, and some other really interesting characters were from the family itself. But we'll get to that a bit later once we go inside. So to begin with, this is the Belgaria Palace. Thank you for joining us today. And something a little bit about the Bhanja dynasty. So my family traces its origins back to the 6th century. And the Bhanja dynasty were local chieftains that have been ruling for the past 1,000 years in the eastern region, what is now we know as modern-day Orissa. Something interesting about the dynasty is that it has both patrilineal and matrilineal lines. That's a little bit uncommon in most royal families in the world, especially in Asia. This is because of our very close connections to local Adivasi communities. So Mayurbhanj is basically the largest district of Orissa, one of its, the third most populous, and it's got over 30 different kinds of local Adivasi communities. Santha, Kom, Munda, Chiki. These are just some of the tribal communities we have. Each of them are characterized by their own language, by their own cultural traditions, their own local customs, and that's what really makes Mayurbhanj come alive. if you actually put Mayurbhanj on Instagram as a mention or a location, it says the land of art and culture. It's because of the diversity of the amount of religions that were allowed to flourish in Mayurbhanj, the amount of communities that were allowed to flourish in Mayurbhanj, with their handlooms, handicrafts, arts, and languages, that we really see this blossoming of arts and culture, some of it under royal patronage. The Mayurbhanj rulers really saw their heyday in the 15th century, because Mayurbhanj was sort of known as the crown jewel on the east, because we were characterized by, we fought wars first with local chieftains, then with the Mughals, then with the Nawabs of Bengal, then with the Marathas. And so right around Mayurbhanj, you're going to find a lot of old ruins and forts. One of the most famous, immortalized in Akbar's biography, the Akbarnama, is the Haripur ruins. Similar to what you'd find, these terracotta brick-built temples you find in Vishnupur in Bengal. And what I love about Haripur is the fact that you actually get to read Akbar's biography, see the Tughlaq, Firoz Shah Tughlaq's invasion in the 1500s, and how the Bhanja dynasty actually sort of, the reason why its lineage was that long was actually its ability to be resilient, to have grit, and be able to adapt to modern times and work with either alliances, business innovations, and entrepreneurship to mold itself to coming ages. I'm going to fast forward a bit because a lot of this is on our website, thebulgariapalace.com, but it gives you a little bit of an understanding of who these people were, who they invited into their estate. And, there was a little known startup by a Parsi gentleman in the early 1900s, and this gentleman actually came to this house to pitch an idea to my great-grandfather, Maharaja Sri Ram Chandra Bhanj-Deo, in the late 1800s, which my family invested in, and the first Tata iron ore and steel mine was actually founded in Mayurbhanj, in Sakchi, in the Guru Masani mines. What we know as modern-day Jamshedpur was actually land given by His Highness to Mr. J.N. Tata to make sure that Indians came together to build sustainable communities and were able to fight the British together. And Sejal, please let me know if I'm a history buff, but if I'm more anyone out there.
I'm loving it, and I'm getting a lot of hearts, so I think others are loving it too, Akshita, so keep going.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm a huge history nerd, and so I have a whole Game of Thrones storytelling tour guide as well. But let me know if you want me to switch into any other topic,
Yeah.
please.
I will.
Some of my favorite anecdotes.
Yeah.
So why don't we move on a little bit, and I want to show you, and don't mind my Great Danes and dragons. The Bhanja dynasties are also great lovers of animals. These mythic dragons that I have.
I remember when I was there last year, how one of them jumped up on me. And
Yes,
I am a little afraid of dogs. Yeah.
They think they're puppies and they still behave like puppies, but we're a pet friendly
I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
Yeah, and something that's interesting. So I'm gonna sort of jump up to the 20th century, because what is really interesting about Bulgaria was all the three palaces of the Mayurbhanj dynasty, which was the Shillong Summer Palace, the Raja Bagh Palace in Calcutta, and the Mayurbhanj Palace, which was all built in the facade of Buckingham, were actually given to become educational institutes right after independence in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Mayurbhanj was, for example, the last princely dynasty, state to merge with the Indian Union in 1949. And the reason for this was already in the 30s, there was a constitutional monarchy. So the crown princes and the princes were actually given, they called themselves servants of the public affairs. So they were given a pension and a stipend to sort of lead. But Maharaja Krishna Chandra Bhanj believed in democracy to a point where he had the Gram Panchayat system in the right after the mutiny, when our armies were disbanded, and he really believed that we needed to have a Senate and we needed to have people's vote. That's one of the reasons you see Orissa has a very strong ground roots appeal. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but those are cannons that were used in our wars. When I was a child, I was always told to dig for treasure. When I was restoring, I had no idea what that meant. We're doing some spring cleaning, but these were actually real-life cannons that were used in wars, fought against fought with the British. And Mayurbhanj also had two airstrips. One was the Raja Basa, which literally, any Game of Thrones fans there?
I'm sure there are. Yeah.
Okay. So Raja Basa actually literally means King's Landing because there were two
Oh.
airfields in Mayurbhanj. And the airfields, one of them was actually known as the clock gun of India because it was for fighter pilots to train in Mayurbhanj. It was the largest airstrip of Asia, donated by the Bhanjar rulers. This is about just 20 minutes away. So if you're ever bored, we take our cars there and we have some really nice picnics and drive on a World War II sort of airfield.
Yeah.
What you see on my right were actually because of the guests who stayed here. The Bulgaria was really a leisure home. It was not the palace for the kings. There's no darbar hall here. We have jazz parlors and saloons. During the prohibition, when we were restoring, we actually found our billiards room had a, I want to say secret door, but not so secret. But it had its own sort of bar. And so what really characterized the Bulgaria Palace was the Art Deco, was the 1920s feel. It was a lot of, I want to say what now we're calling vintage glamour, but at the time it was just the fact that it was inspired by a lot of geometrical patterns, a lot of, the Bengal Renaissance appeal and feel. And for example, what you see behind me is the fact that there were kitchens for Europeans. So what this was these were three different kitchens. One for food from outside. So there was food that was cooked out, hunting foods that was cooked usually in the style of prepared in the ground with clay and terracotta. Then there was one just for Indian food and one just for European cuisine. This obviously would now change into our boutique store. So when you come here, you can actually shop with a lot of sustainable lifestyle brands. Example, the Burlap People, Sienna Store and Cafe, Riti India. We really want to promote two things to our boutique store. One is young and contemporary brands that believe in sustainability. We want to give them a platform to sell from our palace. And second is women-owned brands. So if you're from a brand that is, you have women as directors, you have a lot of female employees, you hire and promote Adivasi employees, we want to be able to stock and store you. So come on in. I'm going to take you from the side, but I want to bring in one angle that's very important to us. This is the female angle. Minalika is pointing at the mangoes. She is a mango fanatic, but most people in India are. So as we go along, you're going to see a lot of orchards and groves of mangoes, a lot of flowering plants, and I'm still getting the hang of some of their names. If you spot a bird, let me know. I spend hours looking at apparently some exotic birds, and most of the times I nod, but my sister and mother are perfect at bird watching.
Okay.
Sorry, I was telling about the female angle. So, Sejal, I remember you had, I sort of spoke to you about a few anecdotes of this. But Bulgaria was essentially built by a Maharani. It was run by a dowager for many years. You had a lot of sort of female princesses who, there are famous pictures of a lot of my great aunts and grandmothers who drove their cars here because Mayurbhanj had a very strong connection to female empowerment. I do want to mention one lady specifically is Maharani Charu Devi. She was my great-grandfather's second wife, and everyone can hear me, correct? Yes. So she was my great-grandfather's second wife, and she basically was she was Rabindranath Tagore's goddaughter, but more importantly, she was the third daughter of Krishna Chandra Sen, Keshav Chandra Sen, sorry. And Keshav Chandra Sen was one of the pioneers of the Bengal Renaissance and the Brahmo Samaj movement. They were against sati, they were against dowry, they believed in women learning about mathematics and science. And so Charu Devi was very opinionated as she was graceful and dignified. So because this house, and because she was not of the same caste and she was considered a different religious entity, the people of Mayurbhanj, it's a very quick love story. It's a lot more of this online. I'm happy to share a link. But because she wasn't allowed to sort of marry my great-grandfather, he married someone else. He married a Rajput princess. They had two lovely sons and a daughter. I'm from that line. But very recently, we discovered my ancestors' love story. And so my great-grandfather, he married, he had to choose between his dharma and his karma. So there was, if anyone knows about Wallace Simpson, you can imagine the scandal it created in the 1900s, because this was
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, King Edward, and this was the King Edward is the only bust of any of the English kings we have in the house, and there's a reason why. It's because Maharani Charu Devi was considered a rebel's daughter. She was considered someone who was outspoken and wanted, to be against Parda, and wanted royal women to sort of be political leaders and advisors. And that's one of the reasons why she invited people like Hemendranath Majumdar, who was considered the last romantic artist. She invited Dr. Annie Besant. They let a lot of leaders and political activists come to Baripada during British rule and speak about what Indian rule meant and how Adivasis can come together. And this was all quite shocking for the royal family for the time. So she was
At the time, I'm sure it was. Yeah, it sounds terribly forward thinking and a great, yeah, it's a great story, about women from that time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's important was, sorry, I know it's a bit of a long love story, but the story is really important because what ended up happening was that they sort of fell in love. He was 18, she was 15. They met at a party Tagore was hosting in Calcutta, and when they met at this party, this is obviously a lot of this is their diaries and forward. There was a lot of courtship through love letters. But what happened was when he went back to Baripada and he said he wants to marry Sucharu Devi, this sort of very forward-thinking girl who, studied maths and science and wanted to educate women and Adivasi women and sort of not wear parda and sit at the man's table and really be a ruler and a leader. The family said that he had to abdicate the throne. Now, as you can imagine, this was extremely I'm going to hold the phone just for a second. Yeah, so, 1 second. Oops. I'm going to move this. Hi. So, this was extremely sort of an affront for the Mayurbhanj family. And they sort of were like, you're going to have to abdicate the throne. So, when people sort of hear about Wallis Simpson, they hear about the British royalty and what happened in the 1920s, if you know the story, if you watch The Crown actually on Netflix. Sucharu Devi was son, and Mrinalika's back. I'm going to give it to her. I like walking and talking. Yep. Okay. And so then what happened was he came back to Calcutta, and he was like, he wrote my eternal apologies, and could you ever forgive me, but I have to do this for my duty. At the time, we found articles from the London Examiner, from the Standard, where it said like a scandal had rocked the Indian capital of Calcutta. That's how big it became, because Mayurbhanj was one of the largest states of the Bengal Eastern States Agency, and it was an extremely powerful political force. So, long story short, he married someone. And, this was around the massive pandemic because right after the Bengal famine in Orissa. And once his first wife dies, he travels around the world. He goes to Madagascar, he goes to Japan, he goes to a lot of different royal families around the world. He comes back to Calcutta and finds out the love of his life, Sucharu Devi, had not got married. She had waited for him for 14 years. And when he came back to Mayurbhanj, he said, I've done my dharma, I've done my duty, and this is my karma. I was meant to be with someone, and I'm going to be with her now. And so she was still not allowed to set foot in the main palace. And that's when he restored this property, the Belgaria Palace, to be an homage to his love story. And he restored and renovated the whole palace for her. So a lot of what you see in here has a feminine touch. Oh wow, the clouds are lovely.
Yeah.
Ooh, sorry.
You can see that.
Beautiful sky, yeah. That was a really beautiful story, Akshita.
Thank you. It's a little long, but it's my favorite because we just discovered it.
Yes. No, and I love the way it links up with the palace also, because it was restored because, it had to become like a place where she could stay,
Yeah, and she actually had a son and daughter in Belgaria. And so, she was very fond of flowers. So all the mango orchards, all the groves here were built by him and her. And this was sort of their, I don't want to use the word love nest, that sounds wrong, but like it was the only place where he could meet her. So for example, if you stand on the terrace of Belgaria, you can see the main palace. Now, because of human cohabitation, it's changed a little bit of the topography. But as you can imagine, 100 years ago, he would come to meet her for a few hours or, like for a few days. Then he would go back to the palace for his royal duties. And they say that he used to light a lamp on the palace so she could always see that he was thinking of her. And that's why Belgaria had such a strong connection. And people sort of remembered this place with a lot of fondness because they were a power couple. When they got married, they were in Mayurbhanj itself. When he had got married to her, there were 200 schools, about 4-5 hospitals. She amped up everything. She spent all the public money on like social welfare schemes, trusts and scholarships. She invested in artists. She started the art patronage era. She sort of put a lot of focus into making sure that Orissa was spoken about, Mayurbhanj was spoken about in a lot of influential Calcutta circles. And she was going to the Taj Palace, in Bombay and making sure that Adivasi causes and concerns were heard about. It's because of her that Sabai Grass and a few of our cottage industries really took up blossoming. And so if you look at the architecture again,
Can I just say something, Akshita? The way the light is at the moment, especially when just before you moved, it was like it was a like a documentary from the past. It was really like this lighting is just so lovely. It's like it's a sepia photograph and we've stepped back in time. And that's just like the story you've told us. So yeah, wonderful. We've had about 20 minutes already, so I just thought I'd tell you that. I know that we have a lot more to talk about, so yeah, go ahead.
So I think that what we gave you is a little piece of So I think what we told you was a little piece of history, is just to sort of pull you into what a bygone era here would have looked like. So you can imagine the 1920s and 30s is really when Belgaria flourished. In the sense there were artists and poets and jazz evenings, and every room we had. When we started restoring the property, there were about 22 rooms. There were about 10 to 15 rooms. We broke them down into 22 rooms because most of these places were ballrooms, leisure rooms, pool rooms, billiards rooms, games rooms. The idea was for people to come here and sort of escape from a lot of formality, decorum, and duty. And I think that because of that, Belgaria had a sense of being outside the box. The kind of artists
like a party house almost, right? I mean, the way you're describing the jazz, I can totally imagine people.
So very quickly, we're gonna see them. It's a little dusk right now. And so basically, what you see here are like some of these are 100-year-old trees. They blossom once in like 20, 30 years. The mangoes are just sprouting a bit. So a lot of hibiscus, a lot of citronella, a lot of, what are the others?
We have bael, pomegranate, we have lemon, Gandharaj lemon, we have all the bael trees. That's also where we think that the name came in from, of the Belgaria Palace. This on the right is actually all the mango orchards. So I know it's a little dark and you may not be able to see them, but we have about like 40 mango trees on the property and about 8 to 10 different varieties. And one of them, I think shown it to Shobha when she came last summer. It's actually 2 species of mangoes that have been grafted together by my grandfather to create a different